if I were to tell somebody that's new to this stuff or wants to do it, is you have to get in the mindset that the time to prepare is now. It's not it's not tomorrow. It's not once you have the money to buy land. It's not once this happens or that happens. You got to be starting now. I will say, like, before we came out here, I had been practicing my backyard gardening skills for years before we came out here. So the gardening stuff and the growing food, I'd already had at least a good grasp on how that stuff worked before I came out here. Solar, I did not. And that's one thing I would have changed, is that I would have actually played with solar a couple years before I came out here and realized that it would have been better for me to not try to learn as I go. So, I mean, I have a pretty good grasp on solar now. I mean, you kind of have to if you live completely off grid, because, you're relying on that for your power every day. So you kind of get thrown into the fire with that when you do what I'm doing. So you do pick it up pretty quick, but it would have been a lot easier for me had I learned this stuff prior to coming out here. Now, how are you going to do that, right? Well, a lot of people would say, well, you can't just set up solar and put your house on solar if you're living in the city. No, you can't. I mean, some people can and some people will, but you can get a panel, you can get a charge controller, you can get an inverter, you can get a battery, and you can learn that way. I'm telling you, like, it's the best way to learn it is just to start small, get a simple system, get all the separate components. I don't recommend getting kits for this kind of thing. I recommend getting each individual component because it forces you to learn the system. And that's what you really need to do with the solar is you need to learn it from the ground up. So that way, once you're off grid and something goes wrong, you're going to at least know where to start or know how to diagnose something or know how to fix it. But if you just get a kit that everything's all together and you don't really pay attention to what's going into it, when something breaks, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to just go get another kit. So it can get expensive doing that. So especially if you haven't moved off grid yet and you're just saying, I'm going to practice now, you've got time. You can go on Facebook Marketplace and you could buy a used panel for about $50 for a 250 watt panel. You can get yourself a deep cycle lead acid battery. That's all you need to start. And you get yourself a cheap Chinese charge controller for 10 or 15 bucks, and you get an inverter. You can get inverted for $50 or $60 from Walmart, 200 watt inverter or something like that. And then you run something off of it, like run a water pump for your garden, or run, I don't know, a fan, but just run anything. And then you will practice, and you would be amazed at how much that's going to teach you. Now, honestly, even when you get to a larger system, the concepts are going to be the same as a small system. Yet, yeah, there's more wires, there's more stuff you got to worry about. But the reality of it is it's still the same concept. So that's my advice on that. Now, as far as gardening goes, like I said, the sooner the better. I mean, the more you learn before you come out here, the better. You're going to have 100 things going on at once when you live off grid, and when you're trying to build your homestead and you're trying to you got all these projects going, and it's endless, and it's going to be overwhelming. And the more stuff you can know, the better. You're not going to be completely prepared for this if you're doing it the way I'm doing it. You're gonna have to learn by making mistakes. But I would say now you can minimize. Don't worry if you don't have the money to buy a homestead yet or buy land or whatever. I don't think it's all about owning land. That's another thing. I think, man, the homesteading lifestyle to me has always been a lifestyle of self-sufficiency. And I've always said that you can homestead in a normal house in the city. There's plenty of people that have homesteads in town. And it's more about, like I said, lifestyle of self-sufficiency. You can grow your own food. You can learn solar. You can learn all kinds of things. A lot of it's about that knowledge that we talked about in the first podcast, that knowledge is freedom. So I like to think that anybody can start doing this before you buy land. Who knows? You may never get land, that's the thing. So, but once you start learning more and more and more, and you just kind of get a better grasp on all the things that you don't know, it it keeps you busy. It keeps your mind busy too. You're not going to be so much worried about money as much. I'll give you an example. Like I would go if I got to move now because the sun's blasting me, but right now, let's say if I lived in the city and let's say that I had a backyard, I lived in a house, and I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to get land, but I knew where I lived right now had a backyard. Well, the first thing I would do is I would start collecting materials. Like I would get pallets first of all because I love working with pallets. Pallets are great. There's 100 uses for these things. I'd get some pallets. I'd break them down and I would build my own garden. Then from there, I would practice growing food, and I would just keep busy doing that. I would get go to restaurants in town, and or if you know someone that works in a restaurant, a lot of times they get their food coming in buckets, like these 5 gallon buckets, and they're all food safe because they have food in them. So you can, a lot of times, if you find somebody, I know they've started these recycling centers now because there's companies, industry that's moving into recycle containers. So it might get harder to get this stuff. So you might want to act now. Um, but yeah, if you can find a source for like 5 gallon buckets, even, I'm telling you, like, before you get out here, if you have sources to get this stuff before you even come here, you're going to be so much better off. Like, I had a source for pallets before I even came out here, so I already knew. I mean, pallets are easy to find anyways, but like I had a source for some really good pallets. Like, they were clean, fairly new looking. So right when I got out here, I knew. I was like, okay, well, pallets, I got that squared away. Buckets, I knew someone that worked at a restaurant, and now I've got like 60 buckets, 5 gallon buckets. I mean, do you know how many uses you have for a 5 gallon bucket on a homestead? I'll tell you one thing I use them for, aside from growing food or hydroponics, grow hydroponics in the ground. But one thing I do with the buckets is I have a shed, right? Now, the shed, I've touched on this a little bit, but we have a lot of rodents out here. So in the shed, the shipping container is pretty closed off, right? So I don't get too many rodent issues in there. But in the shed that I built, I still have rodents in there. So, and they're, no matter what I do, they still get in, they find a way. And the problem with rodents is when they come in, they piss, they shit all over your stuff. They'll pee on your tools. They're really disgusting animals, okay? So I have a bucket system now where I put almost all of my hand tools are in buckets in the shed and they're labeled. And I just have these sealed buckets. So when I walk into the shed, it's a bucket system, right? And I can just say drills, for my electric drills. I got my circular saw in this bucket. And between using that and the totes, it's a really good system and it keeps the rodents off my stuff. So buckets, and I mean, as simple as it sounds, I mean, that's a really good resource to have. So anyways, the point is that you can start homesteading today. You don't have to wait to do it. And I think you should hold yourself accountable to that and just say, you know what? Yeah, I may not have the money now, but if I do get the money, I want to be ready to go. Or this isn't like an event, this is a lifestyle. So to me, it's like, well, it doesn't matter what I have or don't have. My lifestyle choices are that I want to learn to grow my own food. I want to learn to be more self-sufficient. Learn to change the oil in your car. Simple things like that. I mean, I got an old tractor and used to be like, I wouldn't go near something like that. I would have had to get a new tractor because I'd be so scared to work on it. But you know what? After doing the solar and building my confidence up from doing all these different things, I was actually able to get to a point now where I'm not afraid of doing that anymore. So I get this old tractor, and what I did was I got all the manuals for it. I got all the stuff to work on it. And then from there, I just learn it. So that's the momentum that you can get from this. So it's never too late to start, folks. And we're on about 13 minutes. So I will try to keep the podcast coming. Hope everybody's having a good one, and I'm going to get back to work. See you soon.